The centrality of tort law for sport managers requires considerable knowledge about the types of torts that exist, their levels of liability, and the respective defenses to the particular torts. It is essential that this chapter be discussed in any sport law class and that particular attention be given to the categories and liability. Today, we will explore key legal concepts in sports management, including negligence liability, defenses to negligence, intentional torts, and product liability, to understand how they impact decision making and risk management in sport settings. Tort law plays a significant role in sport management as it governs civil wrongs that result in harm or injury. This area of law does not deal with criminal actions, but focuses on compensating victims for damages caused by negligent, intentional, or strict liability-based conduct. For example, negligence arises when there is a failure to act with reasonable care, such as improperly maintaining a sports facility. Intentional torts, on the other hand, involve deliberate actions such as assault during a game or defamation of a player. Product liability, categorized under strict liability, deals with defective equipment or unsafe products that harm users, such as faulty gym equipment. Tort law is different from criminal law in that it is resolved in civil courts, often by juries, and requires a lower burden of proof preponderance of the evidence as opposed to beyond a reasonable doubt in criminal cases. Sport managers must understand these legal distinctions and their practical applications, as negligence and intentional torts frequently arise in their industry. By addressing risks proactively, managers can reduce liability and create safer environments for athletes and spectators alike. Negligence, the most common type of tort in sport, occurs when someone sustains injury due to another's failure to act with reasonable care, even without intent to harm. It requires proving four elements: duty, standard of care, breach of duty, failure to meet that standard, causation, and damages. For example, in Jabo vs. YMCA, a player collapsed and died after inadequate emergency support, highlighting how negligence lawsuits often arise from lapses in safety protocols. Sport managers must address these risks proactively, as negligence lawsuits can result in significant liability and harm to organizational reputation. To prove negligence, the plaintiff must establish four elements: duty, breach, causation, and injury. Duty refers to the standard of care owed by the defendant, requiring them to act as a reasonable and prudent person. A breach occurs when this standard is not met. Causation requires showing a connection between the breach and the injury, including both proximate cause, a sufficiently strong link, and cause in fact, the injury would not have occurred without the breach. Lastly, injury must involve actual harm, whether physical, emotional, or mental. All four elements are necessary for the plaintiff to succeed in a negligence lawsuit and potentially receive compensation for damages. The duty of care refers to the responsibility to act as a reasonable and prudent person under given circumstances to protect others from harm. For sport managers, this means providing a reasonably safe environment for athletes, spectators, and staff. Negligence occurs when a defendant fails to meet this standard, leading to injury or harm. Examples include a lifeguard actively scanning a pool, a football coach ensuring players are hydrated and not forced to play injured, or a dog owner keeping an aggressive pet securely contained. Establishing whether the duty of care was met is critical in determining liability in negligence cases. The standard of care in negligence cases is determined by various factors that guide what is reasonable under the circumstances. Courts often reference case precedent, relying on previous rulings to establish consistency. Legislation, such as state or federal laws, may explicitly outline responsibilities, like requiring automated defibrillators in certain sports facilities. Similarly, municipal rules and regulations can influence safety standards for specific activities. Administrative agencies, such as the Consumer Product Safety Commission, CPSC, provide guidelines that shape expectations of care. Professional associations like the NCAA or NATA issue position statements on topics such as lightning safety or equipment maintenance, which can set industry benchmarks. Finally, expert testimony from professionals in areas like engineering, economics, or sport management helps clarify responsibilities, especially in technical or specialized cases. Understanding these determinants ensures sport managers are aware of their duties and can proactively meet safety expectations. Breach of duty refers to the violation of a legal or moral obligation and the failure to act as the law requires. Once the existence of a duty is established, the focus shifts to determining whether the defendant's actions met the required standard of care. If the standard of care requires the owner of an aggressive dog to keep the dog on a leash, failing to do so would constitute a breach of duty if harm occurs. Causation is an essential part of proving negligence, linking the defendant's actions to the plaintiff's injury. There are two types of causation: cause in fact, the but-for test, and proximate cause, foreseeability. The but-for test asks, would the injury have happened but for the defendant's actions? Foreseeability means the defendant is responsible only for harm that was reasonably predictable. In the Lowe versus California League of Professional Baseball case, a mascot's actions distracted the plaintiff, who was then hit by a foul ball, raising questions about causation. This case demonstrates the importance of analyzing both direct and foreseeable causes to establish liability in negligence. Negligence requires actual harm, either physical or emotional, beyond minor everyday distress. Damages include compensatory, e.g., medical expenses, lost income, and punitive, to punish reckless behavior. To claim damages, the plaintiff must prove injury and its monetary or emotional impact. Punitive damages apply to extreme misconduct, like a reckless player causing harm. Compensation ties directly to the harm suffered and its financial consequences. Gross negligence is a higher degree of carelessness involving willful, wanton, or reckless conduct. It does not involve intent to harm, but includes intent to perform actions that result in harm. Courts distinguish gross negligence from ordinary negligence due to its extreme disregard for safety. An example is the Hackbart case, where intent to strike a player without intent to cause harm was deemed gross negligence. Most jurisdictions consider willful and reckless conduct collectively when determining gross negligence. Situations like improper medical care after heat illness in sports can raise questions of gross negligence. Assumption of risk is a legal defense when plaintiffs accept inherent activity risks. The defendant must show the risk is inherent, consent was voluntary, and the plaintiff understood the risks. Inherent risks are unavoidable in activities like tackling in football or physical contact in hockey. Voluntary consent means participants knowingly accept these risks. Understanding and appreciating risks are essential for the defense to apply. If the plaintiff accepted and understood the risks, they may not claim damages for related injuries. Assumption of risk can be expressed through written or oral agreements like waivers, or implied based on the participants' actions showing voluntary acceptance of risks. Express assumption of risk often uses participation agreements where participants acknowledge and accept potential dangers. Implied assumption occurs when participants engage in activities with inherent risks, like contact sports, without formal agreements. Contributory negligence is a defense where the plaintiff's own negligence contributes to the harm, potentially barring recovery. In comparative fault systems, damages are reduced based on the plaintiff's share of responsibility for the injury. Unforeseeable consequences refer to injuries caused by unpredictable events, absolving defendants from liability if the risks were not reasonably predictable. Intentional torts are deliberate actions that cause harm to persons or property. Harm to persons includes battery, assault, false imprisonment, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and invasion of privacy. Battery involves harmful or offensive physical contact, while assault involves the threat of such contact. Defamation damages a person's reputation through false statements, either written, libel, or spoken, slander. Harm to property includes trespass to real property, trespass to personal property, and disparagement of property. Trespass occurs when someone unlawfully enters or interferes with another's property rights. Disparagement involves false statements that harm the value or ownership of property. Battery is the intentional, harmful, or offensive touching of another person that is unprivileged and unpermitted. To prove battery, the plaintiff must demonstrate intent to make contact and that the contact was harmful or offensive. The contact must also be unprivileged, meaning there is no legal justification, and unpermitted, meaning it occurred without consent. Lastly, the plaintiff must show they suffered damages as a result of the battery. These sentences outline the elements clearly and concisely for easy understanding. Assault is the threat of a battery, involving the threat of harmful or offensive touching. To prove assault, the plaintiff must demonstrate intent to cause apprehension of immediate harmful or offensive contact. The plaintiff must also show they experienced apprehension and that the defendant had the apparent ability to carry out the threat. Lastly, the plaintiff must prove damages resulting from the apprehension caused by the assault. These sentences explain the elements of assault in a straightforward manner. Defamation is a false statement that harms someone's reputation and is shared with a third party. It can be libel, written, or slander, spoken. To prove defamation, the statement must be false, harmful, public, and cause damages. Defamation per se assumes damages for claims involving moral turpitude, a loathsome disease, or professional incompetence. Public figures must prove actual malice or reckless disregard for the truth to succeed in defamation cases. Organizations should verify information and avoid harmful speech to prevent defamation claims. False imprisonment occurs when a person is confined against their will, even without physical barriers. To prove this claim, the plaintiff must show that confinement happened was caused by an act and that they were aware of or harmed by it. For example, a coach restricting a player's movement for too long, or a store manager detaining a customer without proof of wrongdoing could be liable. In sports, managers must ensure that detainment is reasonable, justified, and does not involve force or coercion. Understanding these legal boundaries helps prevent false imprisonment claims in various settings. Intentional infliction of emotional distress occurs when a person intentionally engages in extreme and outrageous conduct that causes severe emotional trauma to another individual. This tort does not require physical harm, but must involve an act that is beyond the bounds of decency. To establish a claim, the plaintiff must demonstrate that the act was intentional, extreme, and outrageous, leading to significant emotional distress. Examples include persistent harassment, false reports of a family member's death, or a coach instructing a player to intentionally harm an opponent. In sports, such behavior can lead to legal consequences if the inflicted emotional distress is severe. Understanding these legal implications helps prevent unethical actions in professional and athletic settings. Invasion of the right to privacy is a broad tort that protects individuals from unjustified intrusions into their personal lives. The U.S. Supreme Court has recognized privacy as a fundamental right, and some states have enacted specific legislation to protect it. This tort includes four key areas: appropriation, intrusion, false light, and public disclosure of private facts. In sports and media, privacy violations can occur when athletes' personal lives are exposed without their consent, leading to legal consequences. Appropriation is a form of invasion of privacy that occurs when someone uses another person's name, likeness, or identifying characteristics without permission, typically for commercial gain. This often happens in sports, such as using an athlete's image on advertisements, posters, or merchandise without consent. For example, selling t shirts featuring a professional football player's photo without authorization constitutes appropriation. Similarly, publishing images of youth athletes in promotional materials without parental consent is also a violation. The primary defenses against appropriation claims include obtaining consent and asserting First Amendment rights if the usage is non commercial. Proper legal and ethical considerations should be followed to prevent privacy violations. Intrusion is a type of invasion of privacy that occurs when someone invades another person's private space or searches their personal belongings without permission. This can include searching a person's home, locker, or personal items such as bags. In sports, an example would be a coach searching a player's backpack for performance-enhancing drugs without consent. Such actions are considered highly offensive to a reasonable person and can lead to legal consequences. The best approach in suspected wrongdoing is to alert the proper authorities rather than conducting unauthorized searches. The primary defense against an intrusion claim is obtaining consent before accessing personal property. False light is a type of invasion of privacy similar to defamation, where an individual is portrayed misleadingly in a way that damages their reputation. This occurs when false or exaggerated information places someone in a negative public perception. For example, if a newspaper falsely claims that a college athlete supports a controversial organization, it may create a misleading impression, harming their image. False light can also arise from misleading photos, such as an athlete pictured with someone in a way that implies a romantic relationship when none exists. These claims are difficult to prove, and the primary defense is the First Amendment, protecting freedom of speech and press. Public disclosure of private facts is a privacy tort that occurs when someone shares private information about an individual that is not of public concern and would cause embarrassment or distress. In sports, media outlets often push boundaries by publishing details beyond an athlete's professional performance, such as their personal relationships or financial struggles. For example, if a newspaper publishes an article about a high school athlete's private life, such as their sex life or finances, it could constitute a violation of privacy. However, public figures, including athletes, have a harder time proving this claim, as the First Amendment protects freedom of speech and press. Trespass to land occurs when a person intentionally enters another's property without permission. Physical damage is not required for liability. Simply being on the property unlawfully is enough. For example, if a university posts no trespassing signs around a football stadium to protect the turf, but individuals ignore them and play a game, they can be held liable for trespassing even if no harm occurs. The purpose of this tort is to protect both property rights and exclusive possession. However, defenses exist, such as necessity, where someone enters the land to prevent harm, e.g., seeking shelter in a stadium during a storm, or privilege, where entry is legally justified. Trespass to personal property occurs when someone unlawfully takes another person's movable property without permission. For example, if someone moves a soccer goal from a sports complex to their backyard, they have committed trespass to personal property. If they keep the item, it becomes conversion, meaning they have wrongfully deprived the owner of its use. These civil violations mirror criminal offenses like theft and larceny, but allow the harmed party to seek financial compensation. In sports, organizations may suffer financial losses if essential equipment is taken without consent. The primary defense against these claims is permission from the rightful owner. Disparagement of property occurs when false statements are made about someone's property or products, leading to financial loss. There are two types: slander of title, which involves falsely claiming that someone does not own their property, e.g., falsely accusing a business of selling stolen goods, and slander of quality, which involves making false statements about the quality of a product, e.g., falsely claiming a jeweler sells fake diamonds. These statements can harm businesses by discouraging customers. Unlike defamation, which concerns false claims about a person, disparagement of property specifically affects business interests and economic value. Product liability refers to the legal responsibility of manufacturers, distributors, or sellers for harm caused by defective products. Liability can be based on negligence, strict liability, or breach of warranty. For example, if a faulty football helmet causes injury, liability may extend to the manufacturer, distributor, and even the retailer. Defenses include improper product use, modifications, or failure to follow instructions. Understanding product liability is crucial for sports organizations and consumer protection. Product liability. Negligence occurs when a manufacturer, distributor, or seller fails to exercise reasonable care in producing or distributing a product, leading to harm. To establish negligence, plaintiffs must prove four elements. 1. Standard of care. The manufacturer had a duty to ensure product safety. 2. Breach of standard, failure to meet that duty. 3. Causation. The breach directly caused harm. And 4. Damages, actual injury or loss occurred. In Jimenez Favre, 24-Hour Fitness USA, Inc., the plaintiff fell off a treadmill due to improper placement and suffered injuries. The gym was found liable because it failed to follow safety guidelines, highlighting how negligence in product liability cases impacts businesses and consumers. Strict liability in product liability applies when a product is defective and causes harm, regardless of fault. Plaintiffs do not need to prove negligence, only that the product was defective in design, manufacture, or warnings, that the defendant was in the business of selling such products, and that the defect caused injury. For example, if a sports league provides cars for representatives at the Super Bowl and they are later sold as nearly new, liability may still apply if a defect causes harm. Strict liability ensures consumer protection, but may not apply to used goods unless special circumstances exist. Breach of warranty is a contractual issue that arises when a product fails to meet the promises made by the manufacturer or seller. Warranties serve as guarantees about a product's quality, safety, or performance, and are often the basis of a sales contract under the Uniform Commercial Code, UCC. If a product is defective and does not function as promised, consumers can seek remedies such as repairs, replacements, or refunds. Unlike negligence or strict liability, breach of warranty claims focus on contractual obligations rather than tort law. However, claims must be filed within a set time frame to remain valid. Types of warranties in product liability include express and implied warranties. Express warranties arise when a seller makes specific claims about a product, such as an advertisement stating that a basketball shoe will increase a player's vertical jump. If the product fails to meet this promise, a breach of express warranty occurs. Implied warranties, governed by the Uniform Commercial Code, UCC, apply automatically in sales transactions. The implied warranty of fitness ensures that a product meets a buyer's specific needs, such as a golf club being suitable for professional courses. The implied warranty of merchantability guarantees that a product is fit for ordinary use and of acceptable quality. While warranties provide consumer protection, they can sometimes be modified or disclaimed through contractual agreements. Types of defects in product liability include manufacturing defects, design defects, and failure to warn defects. A manufacturing defect occurs when a product is incorrectly made, affecting only some units in a product line. A design defect exists when a product is inherently dangerous due to its design, even if manufactured correctly. Courts use a risk utility test to determine if a safer, alternative design could have been used. Failure to warn defects arise when manufacturers do not provide adequate warnings about foreseeable dangers, including improper use. Since manufacturers have greater knowledge of risks, their duty to warn extends beyond the sale of the product. Defenses to strict liability include contributory negligence, assumption of risk, and foreseeable misuse. Contributory negligence applies if the injured party's own actions contributed to the harm. Assumption of risk occurs when a consumer knowingly uses a dangerous product despite being aware of potential hazards. Foreseeable misuse is when a consumer uses a product in an unintended but predictable way, which may reduce or eliminate liability for the manufacturer. These defenses help limit liability when consumer actions significantly contribute to an injury.